Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the top tips that I have for anyone going through IVF. If you've been following my channel, you'll know that we did IVF in February, and you can watch my whole IVF story that I did right here. So if you're interested in just knowing more about like our specific situation or sort of how all of that went down with like some vlog footage, you can go back and watch that video. But in this video, I'm just going to be talking about the top tips that I have for anyone who's planning on going through IVF and just advice that I wish I would have been given prior to doing IVF. So let's get right into it. So my number one top tip that I would definitely tell any of you about to do IVF is to take it one day at a time. If you are considering doing IVF and you've been meeting with the fertility doctor, you've probably been given this insane calendar that lists off all the drugs that you have to take throughout the entire process. And oh my gosh, it is just so overwhelming. I like almost started crying the first time the IVF nurse like went over the schedule, because you're just looking at it and going, how am I ever gonna be able to like keep all of this organized? And it's just very stressful. And it's really hard, like in the early days of IVF, to not be looking ahead at what you're gonna have to do next week or the week after. The more you think about the stuff that's coming up, the more stressed out you're gonna be. And so that's why my advice is to just take it one day at a time. Just focus on, what do I have to do today? So today I have to do an injection in the morning, I have to do an injection in the evening, and I have to take these 3 pills. And just focus on that. And that will just help you, I think, to not be overwhelmed, because if you look at the whole calendar as a whole, you will definitely be overwhelmed. It's a very like overwhelming thing to see all at once. So yeah, just take it one day at a time. Along those same lines, something that helped me was to take a notebook or a notepad and write out AM drugs that I had to take and PM drugs that I had to take, and just any other information that I needed to remember for that day. Because when you're looking at the calendars that they give you, it's a lot of stuff all over the place, and it's like the whole IVF cycle you have to take, you know, in my case I had to take baby aspirin and prenatal vitamins, and but then certain days in the calendar I had to take this, this, and this. So for me, it was easier to just say, okay, in the AM I take all of this, in the PM I take all of this, and just to write that out and then update that as time went on. My next tip is to take time off for IVF, especially if this is your first cycle or a full cycle where you're doing a retrieval as well as a transfer. You're gonna especially need time off if you're doing that retrieval part. So I just think that's something to know ahead of time. If you have an office job, you can maybe save up your vacation days. I don't know how anyone would not need at least a couple of days off for this process, because in addition to, you know, all the emotional stress, there are some times, especially in the days following the retrieval, that, you know, you're just kind of laying around and you don't feel very good. And there were times that it was difficult for me to kind of be up and walking around. I just think it's really good for your emotional health too, because you're gonna be really distracted at work anyway. So yeah, I would recommend you're at least gonna need, you know, 2 or 3 days off during that time. My next tip is to get yourself an electric heating pad, because I used mine so often throughout the entire process. During stims, when, you know, your ovaries are growing, towards the end there, you start to feel so much pressure, and my lower back would hurt really, really badly. My IVF nurse told me it was fine to use a heating pad on my back, and so I was using that a lot. And after the retrieval as well, when I would have pain, I would use my heating pad. So that was kind of like a lifesaver, and I had it near me at all times. So I would recommend definitely getting yourself a heating pad if you don't already have one. My next tip is to take a probiotic. This isn't really something that the doctor will necessarily tell you. They didn't tell me this, but I was on several different types of antibiotics during this time, and so you want to make sure that you're keeping like your gut flora in a good place. So probiotics are helpful. The other thing is, during this process, and I'm sorry if this is TMI, but it's sort of the perfect storm for constipation, because between progesterone injections, painkillers, anesthesia when you get the retrieval done. All of this is stuff that will constipate you, and you don't want that. So yeah, I would definitely recommend probiotics. Also, you might want to get something like a benefiber. And for the days following the retrieval, you'll probably also want to take a stool softener, whichever one your doctor recommends, because yeah, it's just a lot of stuff coming at you at once that can all cause constipation. So the next thing that I want to talk about is OHSS prevention. So that's ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. And this was one of my biggest fears going into IVF because it just seems so scary and I was just terrified of getting it. So basically what OHSS is when it's kind of complicated and confusing, and I probably will do a horrible job explaining it. So, you know, Google it if you want more information. But basically, like, you're stimulating your ovaries, you're producing all these follicles, and then the doctor is going up and like sucking out all of those follicles. And when that happens, your body rushes fluid to that area. And if it rushes too much, then your abdomen and your ovaries and everything in there gets really, really swollen. And it can be really dangerous having that much fluid build up in that area. So you want to prevent that as much as possible. So I did what my doctor recommended for preventing OHSS plus a little bit more, because I did some research on my own and just looked at what other people's doctors were telling them to do, because I would just want to be extra on the safe side. So like, for example, my doctor told me to drink a lot of Gatorade and water. I read online where some people's doctors said you don't even want to drink water, just all Gatorade, because it has that sodium. It's sort of weird because the OHSS prevention diet is like the opposite of what you would think. So normally to prevent bloating, they tell you to avoid salt, avoid sodium, and you kind of have to do all of the opposite things to prevent OHSS. So it's sort of counterintuitive. But yeah, so I drank tons of Gatorade. I actually drank, you want to start this like a day or two prior to the retrieval and then do it for the next week following the retrieval. This is what I did anyway, and it worked because I didn't get even anything close to OHSS. So I did 120 ounces of Gatorade every day for those days. I didn't drink anything else except for a protein shake. So that's the other thing that they'll tell you is a high protein diet is important. So I would drink 120 ounces of Gatorade each day. And I did the actually Powerade rather than Gatorade because they have like Powerade Zero. I didn't want all of the sugar. Then every morning I would take a protein shake with 3 scoops of protein powder. It was just one of those whey protein shakes that guys drink. My husband had like the big tub of the protein powder, so that was what I used, and I did like 3 scoops, which is like the max dose. And I would also put a scoop of benefiber in the protein shake as well, just to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone there. Like I said, I didn't drink any other liquids other than the Gatorade and the protein shake. Just in general, I ate a high sodium, high protein diet, which is what they recommend. So it was kind of weird because that's not really like the healthiest diet, but that's what they will tell you to eat. In addition to that, I also avoided carbs and sugar and caffeine and alcohol. My doctor told me that I could have, I think, 1 cup of coffee a day, but I completely cut it out. And yeah, no alcohol, no sugar. They didn't tell me to do that, but I had read again online that sugar and like carbs, which convert into sugar, can kind of contribute to OHSS. So I just wanted to be on the safe side. So that's what I did. And like I said, it worked. Of course, I'm not a doctor, and whatever your doctor tells you is gonna be the most important, but this is just what I did. And then the last tip that I wanted to talk about is in regards to doing your progesterone injections. So the first injections that you do, which are called the stims, are to stimulate your ovaries, and you'll do those prior to the retrieval. Those ones are really easy. I thought the needle's really short, and it's pretty simple. You can do them yourself without too much of a hassle. However, the progesterone injections are with a much longer needle, and they are intramuscular. So you do them in sort of like your lower back. I sort of consider it like your love handle area where your back muscle is. And those ones are more difficult, more painful, and it's progesterone in oil. So it's like a sort of a thick substance. And so these ones are kind of scary, but there were some tips that I figured out, my husband and I, that made things easier. So I thought I would talk about those right now. So the top 2 kind of positions that I found to be most comfortable is you can either lay down on your stomach, and obviously that makes it so that that muscle is not contracted and it's like in a relaxed position. However, when your ovaries are really swollen, that's not gonna feel good. So during those times, I would stand up, and whichever side you're doing the injection, so we'll just say you're doing the injection on the right side, I would stand on my left foot and kind of pop my knee of my right leg. That just relaxes the muscle there, so that you just definitely don't want that muscle to be contracted when you're doing the injection. It'll just make it hurt worse. Another thing that I did was, prior to doing the injection, I would put an ice pack on that area until it was numb, basically. Now, there are conflicting opinions about this. So some people think that the progesterone and oil, if the area is cold, then it won't go into the muscle as easily because it'll kind of stiffen up. But I didn't find any issues with that. Something that my husband would do is he would heat up the progesterone syringe. He would put it kind of in like a cup of hot water for a little bit. So you want the oil to be warm, because if you know, like when you're cooking, if you put oil on the frying pan, it moves around a lot easier. So you want that to be warm. But in my opinion, you want the area on your back to be ice cold, frozen. And that just, for me, it made it so much easier, because a lot of times if I really did a good job icing it till it was completely numb, I wouldn't even feel the injection at all. So I recommend that. The only thing that you have to remember then is, right after the injection, get your good friend the heating pad out and really heat that area. I would put the heating pad on for like 20 minutes and just like watch TV or whatever. It's also really important right after the injection to do a vigorous massage. So I would kind of just put the heating pad on and then massage the heck out of my lower back area where I did the injection. And that just helps the oil to go into, you want it to go into the muscle. I've read that if it doesn't like penetrate into the muscle enough, then it can leave kind of like a hard spot, which would mean that it's not being absorbed correctly. So yeah, just take the heating pad, which will heat up the oil, and really vigorously like rub it into that area, and that'll just make the muscle absorb the oil a lot easier. So those are all my tips for IVF. I hope it was helpful. Please leave any questions or anything that you have in the comments section. If you like this video, I'd really appreciate if you just clicked the little thumbs up button, and be sure to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.